Now, South Africa's vehicle market continues to shift as consumers feel the pinch of economic strain, which has steered their preferences away from traditional luxury vehicles. This, of course, affects the balance of power in the automotive industry. And joining us now to unpack the forces driving this realignment in greater detail is Editor-at-Large for Financial Mail, David Furlonger. Thank you so much for your time, David, and actually joining us in studio today.
What a treat for you.
Yeah. Talk to us about the metrics that signal that Suzuki might be soon overtaking VW as South Africa's biggest brand in South Africa. Is it a case of the things that Suzuki is doing and maybe things that VW isn't doing?
Okay, firstly, let me say that they could become the second biggest brand.
Okay.
Toyota is still strongly the first brand. Suzuki is a great success story. It has come in with vehicles at lower cost, but also with more of the bells and whistles. It operates on very much a value for money proposition, but it has come in at a lot of its products at the bottom end of the market. It has also avoided the mistake a lot of companies have made, which is to come in cheaply, sell lots, but not have the wherewithal and the resources to look after customers properly. There have been a lot of examples of companies coming in, selling thousands of vehicles, but then no one buys a second vehicle because their service has been so poor and the parts have been so expensive. So Suzuki has done very well in that respect. It's come in at that bottom end of the market and done very well. VW is still an astonishingly good company and its products are outstanding. Its weakness, I think, is that if you look at the Polo and the Vivo, they no longer have an entry level, what I call a real entry level vehicle. You remember, well, perhaps you're too young, but you remember the City Golf,
yes,
which every youngster wanted a City Golf.
Yeah.
Toyota used to do that with the Taz and the Conquest. Companies are coming in with vehicles at that bottom end of the market. VW is not really there anymore. Toyota sort of is, but Suzuki has spotted the gap and it's done very well.
I also want to speak about what we are seeing, and I'm glad that the question is around VW at this point, because when we speak about entry level and price points, David, a lot has changed there as well. Even in the luxury market, which we're seeing people, kind of veering away from. I think of an A1, for instance, which is supposed to be an entry level Audi, or an A-Class, which is supposed to be an entry level Mercedes, or a 1 Series entry level BMW. Neither of those are as affordable as they might have been 10 years ago.
Yeah, but part of the problem is that if you look at the quality of the VWs, of the Toyotas, of those other mainstream companies, even the imports, the Kias and the Hyundais, the quality of their vehicles is growing all the time. And so you can buy I don't want to say a lesser brand, but perhaps a less premium brand with all the same accoutrements, but for rather less. I mean, years ago, BMW and Mercedes used to boast the highest market share in South Africa, the highest in the world. Sure. 1 in every 20 vehicles, in fact, even more than that, was a BMW or a Mercedes. Now, purely because of affordability, that has changed progressively down the years. And that's why, you look at the C-Class, over 90% of those which are built here are exported. The same with BMW, the X3, nearly all of those are exported. That premium segment has just vanished. And I'm not sure, in fact the companies themselves agree, it's never going to go back to where it was. It's all about affordability now. They are still brands that you aspire to, but yeah, it's just the cost.
So are you saying that Suzuki coming in and staying at the bottom end of the market, that is sustainable, that they maybe wouldn't have to expand further into the premium segment for them to gain further sustainable market share?
If you look at the full range of Suzuki vehicles, they're not all at the entry level.
Okay.
They have got some very, very good vehicles in what I call the mid segment. And they've got other vehicles overseas which would fit very comfortably into that premium segment or semi-premium segment. But they have been making all their efforts down at that value for money. And it's not just Suzuki. If you look at one or two of the Chinese brands, the Chery and the Haval, 3 or 4 years ago, no one would be seen dead in a Chinese vehicle of any sort. Now they have made a good name for themselves. They still have to overcome this second purchase thing. If you remember a few years ago, when Tata came into the car market, and they did exceptionally well, but no one bought a second one. Their commercial vehicles, totally different story, but their cars, no one bought a second one. And Haval and Chery and some of the others coming through, I think people will. So they're creating a good segment, but those companies now are in the top 10 sellers in South Africa, which was once unthinkable. It's all around value for money, or perceived value for money.
So let's talk about how all this feeds into the used vehicle market, right, David? Because when we speak of what I'm calling Asian persuasion, it's these cars that are imported from China and India into the market. Haval, Chery, you mentioned them. Maybe people might be trying to figure out if they'd buy a second one. But what happens to how they feed into the used vehicle market? Do we have, the value that's retained there, and also the ability to service and also to, maintain those vehicles?
There is still a question mark among some dealers about the Chinese vehicles retaining their value. My personal view is that you may be taking a risk at this moment, but I think give it another year and they will be very good. I mean, let's remember that when Toyota and Nissan, or what was it in those days? It was before Nissan. It was, anyway, when the Japanese brands came in, they were perceived as trash. If they weren't German and if they weren't American, they were trash. It took them a few years to overcome that perception, and they've done incredibly well. The Koreans did the same. The Tata is maybe the exception to the rule. Mahindra is working its way up that perceived value chain. And the Chinese are doing it very well also. Every generation of Chinese vehicles that comes in is better, but they do still have to overcome this mental block amongst a lot of people. There are guaranteed resale values on some of the Chinese vehicles now, but they will get there. But they've got this mental block still to overcome in some buyers.
Well, we do have to end the conversation there, David. Really, really interesting there as you outlined the structural shifts in consumer preferences in the automotive industry. That was Editor-at-Large for Financial Mail, David Furlonger.